Welcome, everybody. It's lovely to see you here in this socially distant space. I mean, the social distance has gone slightly crazy, actually. Hello, everybody at the back. They're waving to me so they can hear me. That's great. Yeah, this is a bit of an unusual scenario. We're 1 year late, a bit like the Olympic Games, I suppose, and the Euros and so many other things. But we're here and we have a very select audience with us, but we also have some people watching us on their screens at home. So hello to everybody who has tuned in this evening. So I think with no further ado, we'll get straight ahead. I've got my crib sheet here to make sure that I don't forget anything. So I think we'll start off with the first presentation of the RSM medal, and we'll ask Afsana Alanko and Bernard Ho to get the proceedings going.
It is an absolute honor to speak on this platform on behalf of the RSM Trainees Committee as the current president-elect to highlight Afsana's ongoing contribution to the RSM Trainees section and the Royal Society of Medicine. I hope through this RSM medal, we can celebrate her dedication and long-term commitment in facilitating multidisciplinary courses and learning opportunities for students, trainees, and trainers. I could also use this opportunity to showcase her contributions in standard setting and quality assurance in established national educational establishments. However, I want to share a personal note on how she has shown me the possibility of what a trainee in the RSM can do. I still remember the day when I met Afsana in an RSM professional skills course on teaching skills. Through her encouraging words, I applied to be a member in the Trainees Committee, and this helped kickstart many more opportunities for me to give back to this world of medical education. It was only 2 years ago she received this Zenith Global Healthcare Award here in this historic building, and this achievement is only awarded once a decade. As Afsana receives this RSM medal today, I hope she can help carry the vision of the RSM Trainees Committee and continue to inspire a generation of colleagues nationally and internationally. I am glad to have been able to share this moment with all of you here physically and those joining us virtually. As we recover from this period of uncertainty, we hope there will be many more Afsanas who can innovate and encourage those around us. Thank you.
Thank you. Here she comes. He read that in the tiniest print on his iPhone. Wow, that's what youth can do for you. Oops. Oh dear, I'll drop those. That is not good. Afsana, you're going to say a few words?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Got the mic there.
Thank you for those kind words, Bernie. I am honoured to receive this recognition. Firstly, I thank the Royal Society of Medicine for their hard work in organising a wonderful evening. I thank my colleagues, without whose support and trust in following my ideas, we could not achieve the many things we do. You are all amazing people. I thank my great teachers and mentors, without whom I would not be here. I must say, I stand on the shoulders of giants. You have always guided me well. I thank my caring family and friends, those that are here and those that could not be present. You are the people that prop me up and keep me going. I am pleased to share this evening with all the audience, in the auditorium and online. Ultimately, whatever I have ever done, I have done for you. As we have seen recently, healthcare touches all our lives, and it is my honour to serve you. Lastly, and most importantly, I thank my dearest husband. Without him, nothing would be possible. He is truly my strength and stands in the shadows and to help me function. I thank you all.
Well done, Afsana. Fantastic. So the next medal goes to Stephen Gilbert. Stephen Gilbert's been a loyal and stalwart supporter of the Royal Society of Medicine for many years. devoting his time voluntarily to assess the implementation of governance and strategic development. Every charity needs a Stephen, someone who's steeped in and passionate about charity law. Stephen came into the world in Margate in 1952 and was educated at Queen Elizabeth's Grammar School in Faversham, leaving to work at the National Westminster Bank. In the early 30s, he returned to education, studied remotely and passed his Chartered Governance examination in Hove Town Hall, being elected a Fellow in 2005. Subsequently, he did a certificate in charity management at London South Bank University and then achieved a master's in charity accounting and financial management whilst working as a hospice manager at St Wilfrid's Hospice in Eastbourne, where he was in charge of all things non-clinical, including fundraising, accountancy and governance. In 2003, he successfully applied for the CEO position at the Printing Charity, an organisation founded in 1827 with a Royal Charter granted by Queen Victoria in 1865 to support the printing and allied trades. Stephen clarified its remit to alleviate poverty, especially in older age group, and to support education in the printing industry. During his time there, he oversaw its reinvigoration and developed a clearer strategy for the charity and rewrote the Royal Charter for the organisation. Stephen came to the RSM 7 years ago, initially shadowing the chair of Audit and Risk Committee for 6 months, before taking over as its chair for the next 6 years. He's also chaired ITAB, the committee that oversaw redevelopment and modernisation of our IT systems, and during his time with us, he also redrafted our own Royal Charter, clearly defining our main charitable objectives, providing education for all healthcare professionals. Stephen lives in Eastbourne. He's married to Jill, and together they have a much-loved dog called Flora. He's worked tirelessly, enthusiastically, and with enormous patience for the RSM, providing support and very wise counsel during our trickier moments, and there have been a few of those. He thoroughly deserves his medal, and I'm very pleased to present it today. Stephen, up you come. The medal. There you go.
Thank you very much.
A few words.
I will try and be brief, but I need a prompt script first. I'd like to say thank you to the trustees and staff for this honour, and I do feel it's very special. And I have done my best during the last 6-7 years to serve the society, and as Roger has intimated, it has been an interesting 6 years. The society also helped me ease into retirement. I'm not sure how much it was easing on occasions. But what I do feel as I step away from my role is more confident in the society and its future than I have ever been. When I joined, I went around and said, what does the RSM do? The answers were interesting. They weren't clear. Today, and we've had a trustee meeting today, the answer is very clear. It is education. I've watched you through the pandemic, and I've watched trustees and particularly staff rise to the challenges that imposed on this organisation. And I think you come out of it stronger than you went in, although there has been a cost along the way. I'm also very confident for its future because in the past I've listened to ideas and plans and they've been driven by money. The discussions today are all around the strategy for the future of education and what the RSM, this society, can deliver to support healthcare professionals in their careers. My thanks again for this award, and I wish everyone involved with the RSM, staff, trustees, volunteers and members, the very best for the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. He really has been a rock. Okay, so the next presenter is Sam Shindy, and is going to present on behalf of Ian Glenn, Dr. Ian Glenn. Sam, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. President, gathered friends and colleagues, as President of the Anaesthesia section of the RSM, it gives me great pleasure to read my citation for Dr. Ian Glenn. Ian grew up on a small farm on the island of Arran and decided to study veterinary medicine. After graduating from Glasgow University in 1963, he spent a year in Kenya before returning to Glasgow as a house surgeon and later lecturer in veterinary surgery, with a particular responsibility for anaesthesia. Over the next 8 years, he developed an interest in the clinical use in animals of anaesthetic agents such as ketamine and alfezin, which had been developed for use in man around that time. This prompted him in 1972 to apply for a research position at ICI Pharmaceuticals in Cheshire, where the anaesthetics project team was looking for new intravenous and inhalational anaesthetic agents. At ICI, which subsequently became AstraZeneca, he was then involved in the discovery and the development of propofol. Ian ran the biology side of the project and was responsible for the specific selection of propofol for further development and its subsequent detailed pharmacological evaluation. From the early 1980s in the medical department at ICI, he became involved in the Phase 4 clinical trial programme, which looked at propofol's application in animals and which supported the extension of its use in the maintenance of anaesthesia and sedation. A particular challenge was the development of target-controlled infusion, which Ian still has an interest in. Ian has won numerous prizes, and in 1994, Zeneca received a Queen's Award for Technological Innovation for the development of Diprovan, which was the market name of propofol at the time. He has published over 70 articles, lectured both nationally and internationally, and has been recognised with honorary fellowships of the Royal College of Anaesthetists, the Association of Anaesthetists, and the Scottish Society of Anaesthetists. And he's been presented with the Lasker de Bakey Clinical Medical Research Award in 2018, and most recently, the Henry Hickman Medal by the Anaesthesia section of the RSM, in recognition of his original work of outstanding merit in the field of anaesthesia. Ian's discovery of propofol has simply revolutionised the practice of anaesthesia. Propofol is now used every day in every country throughout the world. Indeed, most of our colleagues here at the RSM will have benefited from Ian's invention, be it within the sections of surgery, emergency medicine, comparative medicine, critical care, and even cardiology for cardioversions, psychiatry for ECT, and gastroenterology for sedation. Propofol has unique properties that lend itself to being the ideal intravenous anaesthetic agent. Namely, its quick offset and reduction in nausea and vomiting make it ideal for day case surgery. It doesn't trigger malignant hyperpyrexia in patients who have a rare genetic defect. It can be used to keep patients asleep when they need to be transported within and between hospitals. And it's an ideal agent for technically difficult surgery where patients need to be readily waken up intraoperatively and put back to sleep again, for example in neurosurgery. With its special pharmacodynamic properties, it successfully allowed the introduction of the laryngeal mask airway, which was invented by Archie Brain, and it's an example of how one groundbreaking innovation helped another to emerge. And finally, its low global warming potential and low carbon emissions in theatre means it has significantly smaller environmental impact than volatile agents, which means it fits in so well with our aim to become the world's first carbon net zero national health service. Ian's discovery and development of propofol has transformed and improved the quality of care that we give our patients across so many specialties worldwide. He is a doctor, a scientist, a researcher, a team player, and a visionary. During this pandemic, propofol has allowed a vast number of patients to be safely sedated and mechanically ventilated until they are well enough to breathe on their own. Ian is an incredibly humble man, has changed the face of healthcare, and is highly deserving of this prestigious fellowship. Thank you.
It's good stuff, that propofol. It works. It works. Ian, thank you so much. Come across. We can have a medal for you. A few words first.
A few words first, yes. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate very much the honour and the privilege of receiving this award from the RSM. And I thank Samantha for her comprehensive summary of my achievements with propofol. I would also like to thank the many individuals who have helped me along the way, beginning with the development of veterinary anaesthesia as a specialty. Leslie Hall at Cambridge Vet School and Barbara Weaver at Bristol began down this road by interacting with medical anaesthetists. Sir William Wipers, when Dean of the Vet School in Glasgow, was also President of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, and he encouraged the introduction of specialty diplomas in veterinary practice. And I was the first in 1968 to obtain a diploma in veterinary anaesthesia with Leslie Hall, Barbara Weaver, and Cecil Gray from Liverpool as the medical examiner. At ICI, Roger James was the chemist who submitted a range of alkyl phenols for test after the observation of anaesthetic activity in 2,6-diethylphenol in a group of randomly selected lipophilic compounds in the ICI compound collection. From the systematic evaluation of related compounds, 2,6-diisopropylphenol propofol was selected as a candidate for drug development. The time course of development did not match the alacrity with which Professor Gilbert achieved approval for the COVID vaccine. ICI 35868 was accepted as a development candidate in 1974 and approved to market in 1986. This delay resulted from 2 changes of formulation before the final emulsion formulation that's used today was developed by David Kent and his colleagues in pharmaceutical department. Ron Stark was the physician who ran the clinical trial with the final emulsion formulation, and this was completed rapidly and efficiently. I'm delighted that propofol has achieved the popularity that it has, and there are many others to thank for including my fantastic assistants who helped me in the lab, anaesthetizing a range of animal species as we investigated the properties of propofol. Anesthesia has been a place that I have enjoyed working in and have made many friends around the world. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm going to sign the book. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I should mention that Sam has just been elected as one of our new trustees to the Royal Society of Medicine. So congratulations, Sam. Congratulations to Henrietta Bowden-Jones as well. Two new trustees who take over in October. Now we go virtual, and this is where things could get tricky because we're asking Ian Stephen. Ian, are you there to talk? To give an honorary citation for the honorary fellowship of Professor Dame Claire Marks. Ian, you are there.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege and pleasure to propose Dame Claire Marks for honorary fellowship of the Royal Society of Medicine. I have known her for many years, and she is one of my favourite people. Claire qualified from University College Hospital and quickly decided on a career as a surgeon. This was unusual for a woman at that time. Perhaps it was something to do with the "yes, you can" ethos at Cheltenham Ladies' College, where she was educated. After sampling the other surgical specialties, she chose trauma and orthopedics, a speciality in which even today, only 11% of the consultants are women. Her London training eventually included an arthroplasty fellowship at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts. On her return to the United Kingdom, she was appointed a consultant orthopedic surgeon at St Mary's and St Charles Hospitals in London, with a particular interest in early surgical education. After her marriage, she moved to Ipswich Hospital, where, in addition to being a consultant trauma and orthopedic surgeon, she became clinical director of the combined A&E, T&O and Rheumatology Directorate, and chaired the LNC and the Medical Staff Committee. She was extensively involved in many of the hospital's groups for governance and new projects, and eventually became Associate Medical Director at the Trust with a special remit for revalidation and appraisal. As a prominent member of the British Orthopaedic Association for many years, she was a member and then chair of the Speciality Advisory Committee in Trauma and Orthopaedics, and was co-author of the first competency-based curriculum in trauma and orthopedic surgery. She was the first woman to be elected to the Council of the BOA, and subsequently the first woman to be president of the association. In 2009, she was elected to the Council of the Royal College of Surgeons of England, with responsibility for the patient safety agenda, and was chair of the invited review mechanism, helping departments and surgeons improve surgical practice. Now, 2014 marked a transition for Claire as she retired from orthopedic practice on her election as the first woman to be president of the Royal College of Surgeons of England, leading the new board with its governance changes and the redevelopment of the historic building in Lincoln's Inn Fields, which was completed, of course, within the last month. She then took the lead of the independent review into gross negligence manslaughter and culpable homicide in medical practice, quite a mouthful, and also the Faculty of Medical Leadership and Management. Not content with all that, she took on the challenge of chairing the council of our regulator, the General Medical Council, once again becoming the first woman to take that role. It is with great sadness that we have heard only in the last week that she has had to resign from the GMC because of a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. Despite this, I'm very glad that she has been able to join us by video link tonight. Claire has received many honours and awards, including Deputy Lieutenant of Suffolk, honorary degrees and doctorates from a number of universities, and honorary fellowships of the Royal Colleges in this country and overseas. She was made Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire for services to medicine in 2018. As a champion for diversity and equality in the profession, Claire will be a very worthy recipient of an honorary fellowship of the Royal Society of Medicine, and I am delighted to be able to recommend her to you for the award. Thank you.
Well, thank you, President and RSM. The RSM has been in my life since 1981, when I attended lectures and section meetings as a trainee, presented papers and meetings, and they were just informal and enthusiastic and mentoring groups of colleagues that I met and made friends with. And I've always admired what they've done, but particularly in the recent educational offers in the last few years. And it was a wonderful place to meet friends, particularly after a bit of shopping or along Oxford Street, when it was worth shopping in Oxford Street. This last year has shown that the RSM has a real understanding for the need to keep people together, to be part of a community, to advance science, and for people to be able to enjoy conversations and mutual support. And I've certainly loved tuning into the meetings. I just want to say a particular thank you to Ian Glenn, because I have actually been the beneficiary of your invention of propofol 3 times in the last 10 days. And without that, I think my journey would have been much more difficult. So thank you, Ian, for your citation this evening. Thank you for the honour of this honorary fellowship. And I salute the RSM and wish it the very best for the future.
Oh. What a wonderful lady. We had the opportunity to go and look at the new Royal College of Surgeons of England in Lincoln's Inn Fields, which was really masterminded and pushed through by Claire. It's a fantastic redevelopment, and she is a fantastic lady. And I forgot to say for Ian that by virtue of the authority vested in me by council, I hereby admit you to Honorary Fellow of the Royal Society of Medicine. So I'm doing that for Claire and for Ian together as a dual authorization. We'll obviously she can't come and sign the book now. But I will make sure that I will accept it on her behalf, and I'll make sure that she gets that honorary fellowship document. So moving on, our next application is Professor Sir Stephen O'Reilly. If you could come up with Professor Ketan Dataria, and we'll have the next honorary fellowship. Ketan and Stephen, Sir Stephen, I should say.
Thanks very much for the invitation, and thank you to the audience. It gives me a really great honour to present this fellowship to Steve O'Reilly. Now, most of you will be aware, if you look around, that the world is getting heavier. It doesn't take a genius to know that. And as a diabetes doctor, my workload will never stop. And Steve's entire career has been based on the study of obesity, insulin resistance, and type 2 diabetes, and many of the genetic mechanisms which surround those 3 conditions. And Steve has been instrumental in discovering, I would say that word quite deliberately, not just elucidating, but discovering some of the seminal mechanisms behind the development of obesity, insulin resistance, and type 2 diabetes. He and his work just lead everything that we do. What he's been trying to do over the last many years is not only discover the genetics, but actually put that into clinical practice. So it allows us as jobbing diabetes doctors to use new medications that come along which have been developed on the back of his discoveries. Steve graduated in 1981 and spent the first 10 years training in general medicine, in diabetes endocrinology, in London and in Oxford, and then went over to the US in Harvard, and then landed up in Cambridge in the early 1990s. And he's been there ever since. He eventually ended up as chair in 1996, and in 2002 became the chair of the Department of Clinical Chemistry and Medicine. And he is the co-director of the Wellcome MRC Institute for Metabolic Sciences, which he has led for many, many years. Within the Institute for Metabolic Science, he is the director of the MRC Metabolic Diseases Unit and the Metabolic Research Laboratory at the University of Cambridge. He's the scientific director of the NIHR Cambridge Biomedical Research Centre, and he, as well as being an honorary consultant as well at the Addenbrooke's Hospital. He's a fellow of the Pembroke College at Cambridge, and he's associate faculty member of the Wellcome Sanger Institute. Again, for those of you who don't know, that's all to do with the genetics of humans, basically. He's done lots of work in terms of charitable works and patient-facing, working for lots of patient-facing organisations. Steve has won innumerable awards all over the world. He has won the Heinrich Weiland Prize, the InBev Bailey Latour Prize, the Zult Prize, the European Hormone Prize, the first European Association for the Study of Diabetes, Novo Nordisk Foundation Diabetes Prize. He's won the Banting Medal from the American Diabetes Association. He's given the Harvey oration at the Royal College of Physicians. and has numerous other awards, numerous other doctorates from a number of universities, both in the UK and elsewhere in the world. I think, ladies and gentlemen, we'll hear a lot more about Steve O'Reilly as the years go by. And as a section of endocrinology and diabetes, when we decided we wanted to put somebody up for this fellowship, as a council, we couldn't think of anybody better than Steve O'Reilly. And it gives me really great pleasure to present this to Steve.
Whoops, careful. There you go, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ketan, for that over-generous citation. And it's a great honour indeed to be awarded this fellowship of this esteemed and august society, of which I first heard in 1985. I'd only recently arrived over from Ireland a few years previously, and I was doing a clinical research fellowship with the wonderful Robert Turner, who we lost far too young. And I was doing a weekly endocrine clinic with the somewhat eccentric and irascible Chris Burke. And every week, Chris would say, "You have to join the RSM." And I had no idea what this body was, but Chris was insistent that this was the only place where you could really train properly as an endocrinologist. And so after much pushing, I joined. And Chris made me, I arrived here, and I thought, this is a double whammy. It's a fantastic place to learn and train and hone one's skills as a clinical endocrinologist. And it also provides a wonderful accommodation in the centre of London, way beyond the budget of your average clinical research fellow at that time. So I had a fantastic time, both in the meetings and being able to come down here and use the wonderful premises. Now, I've been very lucky in my life to have the most fantastic mentors, Robert Turner being preeminent among them, but I hope that what I learned from those is that it's really important to encourage the next generation. And all of the things that Ketan mentioned wouldn't have been possible without the group and team that I've managed to gather and join me in Cambridge. And I've trained many fantastic basic and clinical scientists over the last 3 decades, including your successor, Ketan, as president. Stella George did a PhD with me in the late 1990s, and she's coming to be Ketan's successor. And many of you will know some of the great people I've had the opportunity to work and train. People who are more famous than me. Giles Yeo is star of screen and TV. Giles is a fantastic communicator of our science to the public in a variety of vehicles. And Sadaf Faruqi, I'm feeling desperately old as a PhD student of mine has just been elected to the Royal Society. And so I did that it was fantastic news this year. So I've been incredibly lucky with the quality of the people that have come to join me. And that's the reason why I've had any success at all over the last few years. Now, I've lost touch a little bit with the RSM over the years, and I'm delighted I will have a chance to reacquaint myself. But I did look at your mission statement, and the mission statement says that your stated purpose is to promote exchange of information and ideas on the science, practice, and organization of medicine. And I must say I was delighted to see the order in which you had cited those 3 phenomena, or the 3 areas, because yes, your educational activities are clearly really important. It's fantastic that you make people better doctors and better health professionals for the care of patients. And also, it must be said that occasions like this, we all need convivial social events where the esprit de corps of our profession is enhanced by meeting up together and having enjoyable evenings. But I do think that probably what's unique about societies like the RSM is this interface between science and medicine. This is a two-way dialogue. We often think that research goes from bench to bedside, and we take the science and we bring it into clinical practice, but it's not true. It's a two-way dialogue. It goes both ways. And my great hero was Archibald Garrod. I'm much more of a Garrodian than an Oslerian. I think Garrod brought far more to medicine than Osler ever did. And I encourage you to read his 1924 Harveian oration, The Debt of Science to Medicine. And I think what societies like this do, that bring together practitioners and scientists, is to facilitate this two-way dialogue and make sure that we don't forget that as practitioners we have a unique training in human biology, and we have a unique and privileged opportunity to see people and the great heterogeneity of humans at their most vulnerable, but still bringing our scientific curiosity to try and help them, but also progress science. So I'll get off my high horse, my scientific high horse now, and thank you for the great honor of awarding me this, and I'm really looking forward to re-engaging with the RSM.
Good for you, Steve. So, Stephen, I have to give you this. I have to say the magic words. I admit you as honorary fellow of the Royal Society of Medicine. If I don't say the words, it doesn't work. So the magic is dissipated. Harry Potter, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Well, the next medical superstar is Professor Baron Peter Piot and Wim Blanca, who is incoming president of our anaesthesia section, is going to give his citation. Wim, are you there? You are.
Good evening.
In a bow tie.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Professor and President. Professor and Dean, my lord, madam, dear Dame, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure and privilege to introduce Professor Baron Peter Piot. Irving Berlin once remarked, the toughest thing about success is that you have got to keep on being a success. Talent is only a starting point. Professor Baron Peter Piot is a sterling example of original talent leading to lifelong success. As a little 10-year-old boy visiting a local museum in your home region in Flanders, Belgium, you became inspired by Father Damien de Verster. Father Damien was a local priest who traveled to Molokai in Hawaii to care for people with a severely infectious, then still untreatable disease, namely leprosy or Hansen's disease. Father Damien, who later became Saint Damien of Molokai, devoted his whole life to people with an untreatable, contagious disease who, when afflicted, have often been ostracized by their communities and families. This devotion inspired you to study medicine, but also to see medicine as an inroad into dealing with global health problems. Hence, as immunologist and infectiologist, you became, as you described it, an outbreak detective. 5 honors have been bestowed on you in 5 different countries. You are a Knight Commander in the most distinguished Order of St. Michael and St. George. This honor is conferred upon officials who have performed in important duties in the Commonwealth countries. The badge of the order is a medallion of St. George and the Dragon on the one side, and St. Michael combating Satan on the other. A more fitting depiction of your whole career and life is hardly possible. Constantly battling against the dragons and Satan, or in your case, battling against highly infectious, initially incurable diseases worldwide. 45 years ago, in 1976, as a young researcher in the Institute of Tropical Medicine in Antwerp, a sister establishment of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, you were sent through the post a thermos flask with blood of a nun living in what was then Zaire, who had fallen ill with a mysterious deadly disease. As outbreak detective, realizing it was a virus you'd never seen before, you traveled with your colleagues to study the origins and behavior of that disease. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, close to the river, which has lent its name to the deadly disease, namely Ebola. Human touch is important, but with Ebola, it can be deadly. This was the title of the BBC Desert Island Disc program, which featured you in January 2015. Deadly irony forces us now to exchange the words Ebola for COVID-19. Human touch is important, but with COVID-19, it can be deadly. In the early 80s, this story repeated itself. Back in Antwerp, having developed an interest in sexually transmitted diseases, you became a pioneering researcher studying another new virus, which was allegedly affecting only a so-say well-defined part of the population. Again, you didn't take this first impression for granted. Instead, you seriously questioned why a particular virus would only affect human beings in a particular or with a particular sexual orientation. Again, you were breaking new ground, taboos, global misconceptions and stereotypes around the public health aspects and politics of sexually transmitted diseases on a global front. Again, you proved to be right. The virus in question was officially renamed HIV and the disease called AIDS. And yes, the virus can affect all of us. Hence, you became founding head of UNAIDS, supervising thousands of staff in 80 countries and mobilizing $250 million annually. Early 2009, the then UK government's Department for International Development increased its contribution to your organization, UNAIDS, as it named the agency one of the 2 best performers among United Nations agencies. Just printing out the list of your honors, prizes, and achievements amounts to 11 pages with 16 books and more than 600 scientific publications. You are a Doctor Honoris Causa of 8 universities. Just one of your awards is the Vlerick School of Business Enterprising Leader Award, which was granted to you for your clear leadership skills and for leading your organization to an international status through sustainable growth. Under your 10-year leadership, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine doubled in size in terms of staffing, revenue, and outputs, with now over half of its staff based overseas and students coming from more than 60 countries. Your ambition has never been to just stimulate innovation in health and well-being, but also to lobby for and ensure access of such innovation to all those who really need it. As examples, you lobbied for the early emergency release in 2014 of an Ebola vaccine and successfully negotiated a reduction in the price of antiviral drugs. As a global leader in health research and development and innovation, you addressed many times, amongst others, the United Nations General Assembly and Security Council, the World Health Assembly, the African Union, the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, the World Economic Forum, and the parliaments of the UK, United States, Japan, and numerous other countries. You have been constantly battling. Nevertheless, the number of your supporters is still growing. You constantly bring world leaders together from the UK, United Nations, Europe, the Americas, Africa, China, India, Japan, and the list goes on. They are all happy to listen to and follow your advice and leadership. It was therefore somehow not surprising that the Lecture and Awards Committee of the Royal Society of Medicine approved your nomination to become an honorary fellow of our society before the start of the current pandemic. Ebola treatment and a vaccine are now approved. AIDS vaccines are now being trialed, and the COVID vaccines already in our arms. For all these reasons, Mr. President and Dean, upon the recommendation of the Lecture and Awards Committee and Council, I have the honor and privilege to request you to confer the honorary fellowship of the Royal Society of Medicine upon Professor Baron Peter Piot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Wim, for your kind words. I'm really very honored by this honorary fellowship, and I wish I could have been there myself, but I felt it was more prudent to do this at a distance, as much as I enjoy company. For me, this is a recognition also of global health as an integral part of whatever we do in health and in medicine. It also comes at a time, of course, when we don't have to explain that health is global with the COVID pandemic, and that solutions are global and grounded in science. And you know, as with science, you know, being the silver lining in you know, in this tragic epidemic, and as we very pleased that Sarah Gilbert will be, you know, get the gold medal of the Royal Society of Medicine. But it comes also for me at the in my final days as the director of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, this quite remarkable institution. And, you know, I feel very honored to receive this in the city that has been my home for at least for the last 12 and a half years. I first came across the Royal Society of Medicine and stayed there many times, as Steve also said, when I was much younger, in the early 80s, when indeed this other big epidemic, which has killed cumulatively about 35 million people, HIV, AIDS. And when there was debate about whether this was a gay disease, whether this could be transmitted from men to women and women to men, when the first evidence emerged in my lab from about the what we call now variants. I mean, these were just mutations, and HIV mutates at a far higher pace than for example, SARS-CoV-2, but also huge debates about the origin of HIV. You know, and this is a bit of a déjà vu. In this case, did it come out of a lab? Was it injections? Was it colonialism, etc., etc.? And we found that in my lab also that there is an ancestor. This is zoonosis because we isolated a highly related virus from chimpanzees. And so that's how I came to the Royal Society of Medicine, and which was one of the few places where the various protagonists came together. And I'll never forget that. That's and it came to, you know, to a consensus which is really very strongly embedded in science. I've been privileged to be associated with some of the big emerging infections and epidemics in the world, from Ebola to you know, to HIV particularly, where I spend most of my time, and going from basic lab science to actually the politics of it, and which I learned the hard way. But it all told me that you need really to bring together the various disciplines that make up medicine, plus going beyond medicine in order to improve health. And this is where RSM is uniquely placed, as bringing together all the disciplines. Because in our time, we're, you know, with ever more pronounced specialization, subspecialization, hyperspecialization, has the risk of losing sight of people. And even if we need hyperspecialists to develop the innovation and what we need. We're entering clearly in an age of pandemics, partly because of our inability to live in harmony with nature, and also driven partly by climate change. And so pandemics and climate change and planetary health are going to be one of the big issues, and they will not go away in a few years' time. And this is also where I see RSM to play a role internationally to support colleagues and societies, medical societies in various parts of the world, in low-income countries, and to be an effective advocate for taking a global perspective when it comes to medicine and when it comes to health. Again, many thanks for this great honor, and I hope I'll be able to come to you know, the society as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Don't go away just yet, Peter. I've got to say the magic words. I admit you as Honorary Fellow to the Royal Society of Medicine. And we have your certificate there, but we'll get it to you. Thank you. Handing over now to my eminent and imminent, I should say as well, predecessor, Sir Simon Wesley. Simon, over to you.
Imminent predecessor sounds incredibly sinister, doesn't it? Really does. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, much of medicine is about helping our patients by removing or replacing bits of them that have turned nasty, broken, or blocked. Our president and two of our honorary fellows today do just that. And I speak with great sincerity about this, having myself only last week had a cataract removed, which means for the first time I'm able to see our president clearly. An unavoidable side effect, you might say. Now, all of us are concerned with why such operations, or indeed most of the things that doctors do, actually happened in the first place. But not many of us, other than those in public health, I suppose, really do a vast amount about it. It's too difficult. It's not our job. It's a task for a politician, rarely a term of endearment. But not everyone. Now, many of you will know the Frank Capra classic film, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, with James Stewart in the title role. Well, this evening I want to announce the sequel, Dr. Wollaston Went to Westminster. Now, it all started off fairly normally. Sarah Wollaston qualified from Guy's, if you can call that normal, in 1986, and trained as a GP working in Devon. But in 2010, she was elected MP for Totnes, the first ever to be selected by a fully open all-postal primary, and indeed, and not coincidentally, as we'll hear, the last to be chosen that way. Totnes is a remarkable constituency with, I believe, the highest number of alternative therapists anywhere in England. And so not often, or indeed, actually quite often, she's known as the MP for Narnia. Now, having got to the House, she was elected by her peers across all parties to chair the Health Select Committee. And when she was re-elected in 2015 to the same role, she was elected by over 600 MPs out of a total of 638. That's just how popular she is. And the final tribute to her integrity and popularity was to be elected by all the chairs of all the different select committees to be the chair of what is known as the Liaison Committee. That is the only committee with the power to hold the PM to account. Our current PM, by the way, has now taken back that power to appoint the chair himself. And if that isn't a tribute to Sarah, I don't know what is. Now, Sarah's time in the Select Committee was a busy one. She focused on public health, health and social care funding, and the workforce. And one of her first successes was to force publication of the Sugar Report in the run-up to the introduction of the Sugar Drinks Levy. Another was to ensure that the NHS Digital did not become part of the border force and did not share confidential patient address data with the Home Office. She was the first to take the committee on the road, not just to hospitals and GP surgeries, but also to prisons, care homes, schools, and sexual health clinics. Now, in the end, her political career was derailed by what everyone at the time called the greatest crisis that the country has faced since the Second World War, by which I mean Brexit. Now, Sarah did what many of those think for a politician is actually an impossibility. She actually changed her mind on the issue. Since despite being the MP for Narnia, she didn't believe in fairies and knew that red buses promising untold riches for the NHS were unlikely to exist. Now, of course, we have another nomination for the greatest crisis since the Second World War, namely COVID-19. But whilst our second Sarah this evening has led the way in bringing this under control, even our first Sarah of the evening has been unable to perform such miracles. In the end, this cost her her seat. But after losing her seat, what did she do? She didn't use her address book to lobby for contracts, nor did she write salacious diaries dishing the dirt on her ex-colleagues. No. As the pandemic struck, she took the difficult, and indeed it was difficult, and indeed Professor Dame Claire Marks helped her a lot in this, and indeed my wife as well, of returning to full-time general practice after a career break of over 14 years. And now she plays a major part battling her local community, including, of course, the fight against COVID. And so, what our second Sarah of the evening created, our first Sarah now rolls out. So for the classicists out there is an obvious analogy. The Roman general Lucius Quintilius Cincinnatus called from his farm to save the Republic, turned down reward and office, and went back to his literal and metaphorical plough. Forever the symbol of Roman virtue and selfless service. And so in honouring Sarah, we again honour someone who's always remained true to her values, the values of medicine in general, and of primary care in particular. Has shown that you can do good in politics, and you can do good for all our patients, not just for the ones that we see and treat.
And you can leave with your integrity, reputation, and honour not just enhanced, not just intact, but indeed enhanced. Mr. President, I present to you Dr. Sarah Wollaston.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Simon. Fancy that, making a politician sound nice, who'd have thought? And if you haven't heard it yet, congratulations on one of the best Desert Island Discs yet, and also your fellowship of the other Royal Society, so thank you very much. I just want to say what an extraordinary honour this is. I'm so proud to be here, and I'd like to thank you so much for your nomination, and to thank all of those who supported that as well. Because as we've heard already, the RSM, although it's first and foremost about education, it's also about sharing ideas about the science, the practice, and the organisation of medicine. And that couldn't be more important than it is now. I know it's one of the most surprising things to me when I first started as an MP was having people come into my surgeries with conspiracy theories. And if you're talking to somebody who holds a deeply fixed belief that they're being poisoned by vapour trails from aeroplanes, that really doesn't do a great deal of harm. But if those same people are being fed ideas that tell them that vaccinations are dangerous, and we hear the poison that is being poured out in our public life and the disinformation, then having places that truly are centres of excellence and support for those who are actually speaking the truth, speaking the truth not only to those individuals, but speaking the truth to power. This couldn't be more important. So thank you for everything that you do here. And I'd also like to thank all of those who throughout my career have supported me. My husband, Adrian James, and all of the colleagues that I've worked with, the trainees that I worked with, and of course the trainee who then returned the favour and mentored me as I returned to practice after a very long gap. So I have so enjoyed working with them over the years and really valued that. And that's all about the practice of what we do, the practice of medicine, the individual patients, the colleagues around us. As Dame Claire has said, it's about kindness and who we're working with and how we are as clinicians. And all the time I was in politics, when people asked me what I did, what I really wanted to say was, I'm a doctor, because that's where I feel is my spiritual home. And it's a real joy to be here, so thank you, I'm very honoured.
I hereby admit you as an honorary fellow of the Royal Society of Medicine. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Simon, you're on again.
Thank you. Gosh, she's good, isn't she? Okay, moving on, as they say. So now, I want to introduce you to Mr. Balabal Sethia, universally known as B, a truly remarkable man. Graduate of St. Thomas's, he has risen to the pinnacles of cardiac surgery, that most difficult of specialities. And I don't just mean technically, very few have emerged from it with a normal personality, let alone one as warm and generous as B has managed. He specialised in congenital heart disease, working at the Birmingham Children's Hospital and then the Royal Brompton, but where he proved to be a man of great talent and vision. But it's not just in those two centres of excellence where he is known. He is known also in East Jerusalem, in Oman, in Algeria, Brazil, India, Egypt and Spain. Truly a global person, exactly as Baron Piot has outlined. He has reviewed and advised also on the development of cardiac surgery and indeed general surgical specialities all around the world. So he's a man of physical courage. I speak as someone who does also like a bit of going to dangerous places, but I'm in complete awe of B, because when I do it, it's always in the company of large amounts of British soldiers. B does it on his own, alone. He's also morally courageous as well. His career could have been derailed almost before it began, when as a new consultant in Birmingham, he stood up to speak out against what he thought, correctly, were questionable practices, when people just simply didn't do that, especially not people from B's background. In the end, he was proven completely correct. And then, of course, there's his life here at the Royal Society of Medicine. He joined our cardiothoracic section in 1998, became a council member in 2008, treasurer from 2011, and president from 2014. He established programs in global health. Well, of course he would, wouldn't he? He also established his medical innovation programs, new ways of promoting public engagement, and he took the lead on wider access programs for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds before it became fashionable. However, I suppose he'll always be most remembered for his starring role in MasterChef when it came to the RSM. That, I think, will be a unique accolade, as also, I'm pretty sure, unless there's something about you I don't know, Roger, that he's the very first president who also started his life as a merchant seaman. And on the subject of merchants, he's also a very distinguished and well-known wine merchant. Now, I had the honour, or to put it more bluntly, the burden, of succeeding B as president of the RSM. And of course, I knew I could never equal, let alone excel, everything he's done for the RSM. Those words are for you to use, Roger, in case you don't know what to say about me. Just giving you a bit of a hint there. Yeah, you got that. Very good. But I'm being serious because he also showed one more facet of his character when it proved that indeed he hadn't been quite telling the truth, his generosity of spirit. Because despite the fact that it was clear that his successor showed only a fraction of his energy, commitment and skill that he had brought to the role, he had the charm and good manners never once to mention it. So for that, B, and for so much else, our thanks, gratitude and affection. Mr. President, I give you Professor B. Sethia.
Well, thank you, Simon, for those generous words and for the humour that, as always, you inject in whenever you speak to this audience. A bit strange speaking here tonight with so many empty seats, but this has been one of the most wonderful places to visit, to participate in, and to, in a small way, contribute to over the years. I remember 10 years ago, when I was early in my time on council, I wanted to promote the idea of global health as a holistic discipline across all specialties in this organisation. And I was very fortunate to have the strong support of Robin Williamson, who was the president, but then in particular of Parveen Kumar, his successor. And it's wonderful to be here on an evening when Peter Piot has accepted an honorary fellowship, because Peter was the first person I went to consult when I asked Council of the RSM to let me start to develop this interest in global health. Like Peter and like many in this audience, I feel that the holistic approach to health is a fundamental part of all that we do. In that spirit, the fact that the RSM was one of the founding members of the UK Health Alliance on climate change is a particularly gratifying development. And none of this would have been possible without strong support of so many colleagues, some of whom I see in the audience tonight, of my family, of my friends, not always of some of my colleagues in other parts of the world, but nevertheless, I'm very grateful for all the help that I have received along the way. And I, again, like others, would mention how wonderful the staff of the RSM have been in supporting everybody who contributes to this wonderful organisation. Above all, one of the aims that I put out when I became president 7 years ago now, it seems an awfully long time ago, was to promote the interest of younger people in this organisation, as we still had a reputation then of being perhaps a little bit, let's say, fuddy-duddy in some of our attitudes. But I have always said that this is one of the best dating agencies in town. It brings people together. It lightens up the enthusiasm and reinforces the energy that so many people, in particular young people, have for this society. And so it's been very gratifying, particularly through the COVID pandemic, through your time as President Simon, and now through Roger's time here, to see how things have changed and have moved on. I think the RSM has gone from strength to strength, not only in its educational remit, but in its contributions and its dedication to caring in the broader sense of all medical activities. So even though I'm a strange individual, as you've heard, a cardiac surgeon by background, I maintain that this holistic this holistic attitude, this caring attitude, which is at the essence of all that we do in the RSM, is something that is very special, and long may it live on. Thank you to the RSM, to the Council, to the President, to all of you who have supported me in my mission here over the years for this great honour, which is really one of the highlights of my professional career. Thank you so much.
Magic words, I admit you as Honorary Fellow to the Royal Society of Medicine. I should say he has a brother who's a urologist, so that makes everything all right. Thank you, Pete. Don't forget to sign the book. Okay, thank you, Simon. We'll see you again shortly. Okay, the last award really is really we're tonight dealing with global superstars, and this lady has in short 18 months gone from relative obscurity to global superstardom. So Dame Professor Sarah Catherine Gilbert. The gold medal award goes to you from the Royal Society of Medicine. You're a world-renowned British scientist, the Side Professor of Vaccinology at the University of Oxford, and co-founder of the biotechnology company Vaccitech. You specialise in the development of vaccines against influenza and emerging viral pathogens, and you led the development and testing of the universal flu vaccine over 10 years ago. On New Year's Day, 2020, Sarah read about 4 people in Wuhan, China, suffering from a strange pneumonia of unknown cause. Within 2 weeks, a vaccine had been designed at her laboratories in Oxford against the new pathogen, which we now all know as COVID-19. Less than a year later, on the 30th of December 2020, the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine she co-developed was approved for the use in the United Kingdom, and on from that globally. Born in Kettering, Northamptonshire, to a father who was an office manager for a shoemaking company and a primary school teacher mother, she attended Kettering High School for Girls, where she realised she wanted to work in medicine. A BSc in Biological Sciences from the University of East Anglia followed in 1983, where she began playing the saxophone. She'd practice in the local woods so as not to disturb others in her halls, showing her compassion to her fellow students. And then she moved to the University of Hull for her doctoral degree, where she instigated the genetics and biochemistry of yeast, graduating as a PhD in 1986. After some time as working as a postdoctoral researcher in industry, in the brewing industry, and subsequently at Leicester Biocentre, Sarah joined Delta Biotechnology. But in 1994, she returned to academia, seeing the light, I suppose, joining the laboratory of Adrian Hill in Oxford, and her early research examined host-parasite interactions in malaria. She was made a reader in vaccinology shortly after. With the support of the Wellcome Trust, Sarah started work on the design and creation of a novel influenza vaccine. In particular, her research focused on the development and preclinical testing of viral vaccinations, which embedded a pathogenic protein inside a safe viral vector. These viral vaccinations induced T-cell response, and these could be deployed not only against viral diseases, but also against malaria and possibly cancer. She was involved in the development and testing of the universal flu vaccine, her research demonstrating that the adenoviral vector could be used to create vaccines that are protective against Middle East respiratory syndrome in mice and able to induce an immune response against MERS in humans. Having been instrumental in the development of a new vaccine to protect against coronavirus since the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Sarah continues to lead the work on this vaccine alongside Andrew Pollard, Sandy Douglas, Catherine Green and Adrian Hill. As with her earlier work with the COVID-19 vaccine, she makes use of that adenoviral vector, which stimulates an immune response against the coronavirus spike protein. Sarah received a standing ovation at this year's Wimbledon Championships. I was watching that on my television, and was created a Dame of the British Empire in the Queen's birthday honours. When the pandemic's eventually over, her vaccine will have saved literally many hundreds of thousands of lives. I can commend to you her new book. I've actually got a copy of it here, Vaxxers, co-authored with Catherine Green, and recently selected as Radio 4's Book of the Week. And I'm truly delighted tonight to award you, Sarah number 2, the Gold Medal of the Royal Society of Medicine. Do come up here, Sarah. Should we have a standing ovation ourselves? Let's do it. You can't be outdone by a woman.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very kind. So it's a great honour, obviously, to receive this award, the gold medal from the Royal Society of Medicine. It's also, for me, very unexpected. The only other time that I've stood on this stage was at a Saturday symposium to talk about advances in medicine, which was chaired by Sir Simon, who announced he was quite upset to hear me describe myself as a vaccinologist. A word that I don't think he'd come across before, but maybe something that's become a bit more used in recent years, and I hope you've got used to the idea now. So when I started to work on the vaccine against COVID-19 at the very beginning of 2020, it was very quickly a team effort. And of course, very many people have contributed to this discovery and the vaccine development and the vaccine rollout. There are really many, many people who are superstars in the team, but all of us working together have been what's made this vaccine development and use possible. So within the first few days of January, I was talking to people in my lab about how we were going to take the vaccine development forward and where we were going to find the money, because we didn't have any. And then we started talking to colleagues at the National Institutes of Health who were working on an animal model that we could use to test our COVID vaccine in very early stages. I started talking to Kath Green, our head of biomanufacturing, about accelerating manufacturing of the vaccine ready for clinical trials, and of course Andrew Pollard, who became the chief investigator of the clinical trials not only in the UK but in Brazil and in South Africa as well. And then our partnership grew. We had a very large team working on the trials, many, many different disciplines. We had research fellows, research nurses, people who looked after the volunteers, medical students who helped the volunteers find the way around our increasingly growing clinical trial site, because with the need for social distancing, we actually had to bring in 2 mobile units to be able to fit all the volunteers into our clinical site, but still keep them appropriately distanced. And we realised that one thing that we'd never actually thought about is how to deal with the development of a pandemic vaccine when we are experiencing a pandemic. We'd always really thought about developing a vaccine against an outbreak and then taking it to where it was needed. And we found ourselves in a very different situation and had to adapt to that very quickly. And then the partnership extended to other entities. We had government support from the Vaccines Task Force, giving us financial support to continue with the development. AstraZeneca licensed the vaccine and took on our mission of making it widely available at cost across the whole world. They're shortly to announce, please keep this to yourself just for now, but they're getting very close to 1 billion doses, and that will be announced shortly. And that's a really impressive effort on their manufacturing side. 20 different clinical manufacturing sites have been brought into use to manufacture this vaccine deliberately around the world so that there can be local supply for different parts of the world. But unfortunately, despite the fact that we managed to develop this vaccine in under a year, we did run into some technical difficulties, and if you read the book, you'll see some of the difficulties that we encountered, some of the things that we'd asked for before the pandemic we hadn't received, and that made it difficult to get our clinical trials started and to keep them continued and to get to where we needed to be. And unfortunately, as we've heard from Peter Piot earlier, this isn't the last time we're going to have a pandemic, and we need to do more to prepare for the next time. So I hope now that the lessons we've learnt in my field, as well as in many others, will be learned, and we will be better prepared for the next time this happens. So the last thing I want to say is that we wrote the book, Kath and I, Vaxxers, because we wanted to tell the story. We wanted the science to be seen and to be understood. We don't want our work to be hidden away, where what is talked about is all the conspiracy theories, the crazy ideas that sometimes people share with other people and trying to put them off getting vaccinated. We wanted the science to be open, to be transparent, to be explained, to be accessible. And as we've heard, it's a really strong focus of the RSM to have education. But I think we need to think more about the education of everybody, not just the education of the profession. We need to spread the education to the general public and try to make the description of medical advances more accessible across the board so that people have, again, greater trust in experts, which is something that we've lost in recent years. So again, thank you very much for this honour.
So, Simon, I think you're up next. Don't forget to buy the book, everybody.
I see we still have that plonky music, don't we? We haven't lost that in the last 2 years. That's a shame. What a shame. So, now then, it's my final act as departing president. Well, you know I've departed, but let's just pretend. Is to hand over the chain and cares of office, indeed, as president to Roger. And the first thing to say, after an unprecedented year, in which the word unprecedented has in fact become the most used in the English language, is how well Roger is looking. Well done, Roger. The portrait we have of you upstairs looks absolutely dreadful, but you're looking pretty good. Now then, it's 4 years ago when I took office, and I just had a look back at what I said 4 years ago. And there was some very nice stuff about B in it, as there indeed should be. There was quite a lot of teasing of Mike Rawlins, as indeed there should be. And there was nothing about Roger, because actually I had barely met him at that time. But that period of innocence didn't last very long. Now, I have to admit, on our first meeting, he fitted my, as you've already heard, admittedly somewhat stereotypical view of what surgeons are. He was from Cambridge, the Middlesex, done his surgical training, consultant urologist at Barts, large private practice, and so on and so forth. But peel away the surface, and actually that is what he is. No, I'm joking. No. What is revealed is that Roger is in fact anything but a stereotype. For example, he has a doctorate. Well, back then that was just another step up the ladder to getting a consultancy in virtually any senior post in medicine. But I had a look at it very recently, because actually it's not just that at all. It's actually a very, very serious one, written with Giles Brinley and the great Claire Fowler, both of whom in my world, I know of, who are incredibly famous. It led to him giving a Hunterian lecture at the Royal College of Surgeons. Now, most consultants of every shape and form stop at that point. Research, tick, done that. But not Roger. He's actually got over 400 papers to his name and an H-index well north of 50. And then I read that Roger was related to someone called Ken Kirby, the famous chemist, and indeed an FRS. Well, not just related, it's actually his father. So, his father would indeed have been well proud of what Roger has achieved in the world of research. Okay, he can do research and write academic papers. But he can do more than that. He can actually write proper English, and trust me, not many of them can. And I know that because his popular writings, for example, in lots of magazines, newspapers, things like that, Trends in Men's Health that he set up, it shows that he actually could easily have made a living as a professional medical journalist. Okay, so he can write. Can he then cut it then, metaphorically as well as literally, as a clinician? Oh yeah, he certainly can. He's a major clinical leader, an innovator, one of the early adopters of open radical prostatectomy, a pioneer of the use of surgical robots, and indeed of minimally invasive procedures in general. All right, as well as being a surgeon, is he also a normal human being? Very much so. Do people actually like him? Yes, they do, which in our circles mean, can he raise money? Oh, yes, he can. He's a massive fundraiser for charities, usually involving daft excesses of climbing, running, or cycling. God knows how he hasn't been injured of them. He obviously has a guardian angel somewhere. And then, does he have a cultural hinterland? Again, very much so. And we can see, just as we can see the influence of Professor Ken Kirby, FRS, in Roger, we can also detect the influence of Roger and Jane in their daughter, Vanessa. Now, all of that is history. All of that is what Roger was like before he took office. And this is where it normally gets difficult, for the predecessor, me, to welcome the successor, because this is when we all have to kind of cross our fingers behind our backs, hope for the best, as we say how well our successor will undoubtedly perform as the next president, or whatever it will be, when what we really want to say sometimes is, my God, how on earth did the members manage to get this so wrong? We are doomed, I tell you, doomed. But for once I have the privilege of hindsight, because it's not just a pious hope, but a statement of fact when I say that Roger has been little short of brilliant in the role. So far, every single day of his presidency has been under the shadow of you-know-what. And just although, thanks to Sarah Gilbert and her colleagues, we can now really see an end to this, Roger has still not had a single normal day in the office. And for one so gregarious, so sociable and so successful, sometimes the last year must have been something of a torment. But RSM and Roger go together like a horse and carriage. Roger is the RSM to his fingertips. And with the support of Michelle and the wonderful team we now have here, lockdown has been for many of our members actually possibly the finest hour of the RSM. Roger has been brilliant. He's now learnt not just to write well, but to speak well. He's learnt a new skill as an amazing interviewer and compere. He's always been charming, but he's now charming and beguiling to everyone, from Nobel laureates, politicians, wine buffs. I suspect that was actually Coles to Newcastle, to be honest, but much else beside. Now then, all of us involved in our COVID series and our In Conversation struggled a bit at the start. It took some time before all of us, and Roger as well, metamorphosed into a skilled user of Zoom and Teams. Indeed, Roger's now well on the way to becoming a national treasure, a kind of Piers Morgan without the nasty bits. Actually, they're all nasty bits, aren't they? So probably not the best analogy. But there were mishaps. And so when Roger was introducing one nameless celebrity, who's actually called Sir Michael Palin, we sympathised when Roger suddenly disappeared off the screen for a considerable period of time, leaving Sir Michael with little choice but to start chatting to himself and finally reciting old Python classics. Now, we can forgive Roger for being caught out by, was it a dodgy Wi-Fi, as he claimed, or pressing the wrong button, as he also claimed. But these things were all, so new. But some things are not so new, are they? Laptops aren't new. They're not new. And the fact that laptops run on electricity, that's not new, is it? We've kind of all known that, don't we? We all should know that. And they've been with us for some time, as has electricity. And the fact that they don't function without power surely should not have defeated the great clinician and researcher that Roger is. Because that is exactly what he had forgotten. He'd forgotten to plug it in. There's minimalism, and then there's plain stupidity. Let's hope that he doesn't forget to plug in one of his robots one day. You can just see one of them saying, oh, Professor Kirby, please plug me in so we can operate. Now, cometh the man, cometh the hour, cometh the address book. And he has already used that to major effect, as we've said, in our COVID series, our climate change series, our new professional AV setup, and much, much more besides. So a lot has changed since I took the handover from B. A lot has changed in my life, a lot has changed in all of our lives, not all of it good. But getting to know Roger has, over the last few years, been one of the highlights of that period for me personally. And so this morning, we received, as we do every Tuesday, the feedback report from the most recent In Conversation. Last week, Roger was the interviewer. Baroness Helena Kennedy was the distinguished guest. She was, of course, praised for the skies. What I liked so much was what one comment said about Roger's performance as the host. Just 3 words. Perfect, as ever. Roger, welcome. Now, I'm now supposed to give you the chain of office. I've got to put it on, yes. Yeah. I think you have to lower your head to me for the first and only time. Here we go.
Oh my God.
I know, which way round does it go? There we are. Here you go.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Bravo. And the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Simon. I have to say, I've just received a text that Simon and I have been headhunted to present the Oscars next year. Simon, so we're in luck. We can get paid a lot of money for that. Thank you, Simon, for those kind words. I have to say that the year I spent shadowing, or maybe undershadowing you as President-elect, was extremely eventful, You'll remember that. But overall exciting and very productive, and so helpful to me in terms of getting to grip with the role. Even if COVID-19 raised its ugly head during those early months of 2020 and dramatically impacted on the last 6 months of your presidency. It's of course the pandemic that's delayed this inauguration ceremony by 12 months, and the recent uptick of infections caused by the Delta variant that's forced us to cut the number of guests here by more than 50% for safety reasons and to reduce the risk of you being pinged tomorrow. We live in the United Pingdom these days. We do apologise to all those who booked to come here tonight, only to be disappointed on being told that this was no longer possible. Nevertheless, the fact that we're beaming this ceremony out live online and posting it on YouTube afterwards should allow you to feel that you've at least been able to participate to some extent in the occasion. We are, of course, here in the 116-year-old home of the RSM at our famous number 1 Wimpole Street. Many of you will be aware that this august institution was created by our first president, Sir Richard Douglas Powell, who entered into negotiations to join with other London specialist medical societies in 1905. The multidisciplinary nature of our organisation, already mentioned tonight, has stood us in especially good stead over the last few months and clearly points the way ahead for us in the future. Simon and I have the dubious privilege of being only the second and third presidents of the RSM to lead the institution during a pandemic, the first being Sir Humphrey Rolleston, who was in charge during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. Tricky situation. As with so many organisations, COVID has forced the closure of our building for the greater part of 18 months. We were so sad to see so many of our loyal and hard-working employees depart as a consequence. On a positive note, as Simon's already mentioned, the pandemic has encouraged the RSM to shift its educational emphasis from in-person events to an online offering. And I must admit I'm very proud of our Thursday lunchtime COVID-19 webinars, which have attracted nearly 150,000 registrants and are widely quoted in the serious media, usually the day after they've been screened. And then there's our recent climate change series, featuring His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, in the very first episode, which has been viewed by more than 10,000 people. Our highly valued 55 specialist sections have also created an enormous and a diverse range of fantastic online educational material, and we thank them for all their hard work and dedication. And our weekly In Conversation live webinars, inspired by the famous In the Psychiatrist's Chair BBC series, Professor Anthony Clare, and designed to provide some much-needed relief from our pandemic woes, has proved a great success, with a range of guests from Stephen Fry attracting more than 64,000 participants over the course of a year, and one of the ones that Simon ran actually received 1 million YouTube views. Speaking of thanks, the output of this most difficult of years would not have been possible without the excellent skills of our amazing education department, indeed all our staff, who in so many ways have supported this Herculean effort. The high quality of our educational output has helped us to raise more than £1 million this year in charitable donations. We have to do even better next year to help fund these events and allow us to deliver on our mission to advance healthcare and innovation. Particularly like to thank Joe Rose and Charlotte Dindorf, joint organisers of tonight, who comprise the irreplaceable backbone of the RSM, on whom we rely so heavily. Grateful thanks also go to our Dean, our Chairman of the Academic Board, Nick, as well as to our indefatigable CEO, Michelle Acton, and her excellent senior management team that she's assembled. They've worked so hard to define our strategic way ahead as we emerge, hopefully, from the pandemic. I must also mention our highly valued trustees who've dedicated so much of their time helping our institution navigate its way through recent turbulent waters. And since we're broadcasting this meeting from the Guy Whittle Lecture Theatre, I'd like to extend a especially warm welcome to Dr. Geoffrey Guy, who I saw outside, a long-term supporter of the RSM, and without whose generosity we would not be sitting in this wonderful hall. We sincerely appreciate his commitment and his support. I really do believe that the excellent work of our educators over the past 18 months, the RSM is now poised to take major strides in providing the highest quality multi-professional healthcare education to a much wider audience. We are truly in the zone. And I'm immensely proud to be part of an organisation whose contribution to society is now unquestionable. Finally, the reduction in COVID case numbers reported in the recent days can perhaps provide us with some hope that the worst of the pandemic may be over, thanks to the vaxxers, and not least to Dame Sarah Gilbert. So I'd like to now, as well as congratulating Sarah, our illustrious medal winners and honorary fellows, to invite Simon back to receive his honorary fellowship and his past President's Medal, which I think I can find over here with luck. I'm blushing. I don't often see him blush. And I think now we can go and drink some appropriately labelled Pol Roger, so and have some supper for dinner in the restaurant through the way. So thank you, everybody. I'm so sorry that we've been socially distanced and everybody couldn't come, but wow, we've had some famous people here to give awards to, so it's been great. Thank you. Bye-bye.